They're taking the course of Psychology of Living with Dying, watching 6 Feet Under, and living through the past 4 months of tragedy on campus. We thought it would be interesting to delve into the impacts that death has on the living. We looked at death in 3 main aspects: the environmental implications, the business side, and the emotional process.
We asked Dr. David White, a professional in environmental studies, about the effects that burials and cremations have on the environment.
It's important that folks get a sense of their impacts on this planet, and particularly the long-term impacts on the planet.
Environmental analysts have calculated that cremating one corpse requires 2 to 3 hours and more than 1,800 degrees of heat, enough energy to release 573 pounds of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere.
I certainly would not be in favor of cremation to any degree at that level. The reason simply is that we have too much CO2 in the atmosphere, and generally speaking, the less the better.
Casket burials release chemicals like formaldehyde and methyl alcohol into the earth, polluting groundwater. Each year, nearly 22,500 cemeteries bury tons of wood and concrete and embalming fluid into the ground as well.
I certainly would be an advocate of green death. I mean, the amount of chemicals that are introduced into the human body after death and that do leak into waterways and the soils is a serious problem. Yeah.
Dr. White recommends that educating people of different burial options and what impact they have is crucial to helping the environment.
Gordon Kuhl, a local probate attorney, describes the process of wills and succession of trusts after someone dies.
So if they have any bank accounts, or when they selling a car, selling the house, transferring anything like that, all those costs from the attorney come out of that person's property.
Okay.
So when the whole thing is over, the courts determine that you're right, that this person gets what they are given during the will. Everything they get is after people have been paid. So, the attorney's been paid, all accounts have been closed, all that sort of thing. Ideally, when you have like a lot of cash basis stuff, you're selling things and it goes into one big bank account, and then people get paid out of that. Now, obviously, if there's a house, certain people might get the house, that sort of thing.
Okay, and so how long? Kuhl says it is very important to have a will, but what happens when you don't?
And so, I was thinking about this. Prince, who just died, apparently didn't have a will.
No will. That's what they say. No will.
No will. So how are they going to,
Sure.
his kids?
Sure. I don't know, did Prince have children? I don't think he did. I don't think Prince had children. All right, so say this was in Louisiana.
Mm-hmm.
So first it goes, you look at a couple things. Prince was not married.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so no spouse, no children. If he was in Louisiana, it would actually go up to his parents. If his parents, or who knows if they're alive or not, if his parents were deceased, then it would actually go down to his parents. Then it would go up to his grandparents, who undoubtedly are dead by now. But then it would go from the grandparents' line all the way down until you find somebody.
Shoot.
Okay, so.
And then equally split that between whoever you find.
And so it would, so you go, what do they call it? You go down first to your children. If you have no children, then it goes all the way back up, and then it goes all the way back down. So, yeah, especially when we were talking about how much money Prince had, $500 million or something like that. That's a very interesting thing on who's going to get to control that, and it really could end up being some niece or nephew, depending on what the situation was.
And why would someone like him, who was kind of on his deathbed, a lot of money, not make a will?
Yeah, that's it's obviously a good question that's hard to answer. Maybe he didn't think he was at that point. I think honestly it's a failure of his agent, his people that were helping him out, and the guy had a big enterprise, and I think it's important for somebody with relatively few assets to have a will, just so you have that peace of mind of what you want to happen is going to happen, because the state of Louisiana doesn't care. They'd have no interest in who gets what.
Right.
But there's rules, and there's an orderly progression of who takes under the will. So that's why it's important.
Kuhl talks about the importance of having an attorney following someone's death.
I mean, half of, I guess, what I do is not that I'm a therapist or any way, but I'm kind of a voice of reason during a time that it's really hard for people to think about it. You know, you think about grief, you think about the loss of a loved one, you don't really necessarily even want to think about, you know, what happens to Granny's car.
Right.
It's not, and that the fact that, you know, you can't just take Granny's car. You got to go through probate. You got to do it in succession. You have to go to the DMV to change the title. You got to do all these things, and it's an aggravation. And most people, you know, people aren't in it to get free stuff.
Right.
You know, people care about what happens to the loved one that died, what happens with, you know, the family and things like that. And people don't want to deal with the nitty gritty. And when they find out that it is an aggravation, that there is you got to start a court case and all that stuff. It's important to have an attorney and to get somebody that you trust, and I think it's a stabilizing kind of part of the whole process, and it leads to closure. Because
To get another view on the business of death, we interviewed Stephanie Poucher, who is a funeral director at Jacob Shane and Sons. We asked Poucher to differentiate between burial and cremation.
The stigma of cremation, if you're Catholic, is no longer. People do it for all different reasons. I mean, it's economical, but now it's getting to the point where it's it is less expensive than a traditional full funeral, but people do it because they, not many people go and visit cemeteries anymore or want to have that added expense of keeping up a piece of property at a cemetery and things like that. And so I find some people choose to keep mom at home in the urn, and not even do a burial. So it's not just for financial reasons. I find people do it now because it's just another way to, instead of just everybody did the embalming, the visitation, and the burial, it's just something different. Some people just don't like the idea of cremation in general. I think still we need to do a better job of marketing and letting families know what cremation really is. They just see it as something that's just, you're going to cremate my mom and that's going to be the end of it. They don't realize all the memorial service that you can go into it and celebrating that person's life. So I think a lot is just tradition of what they've always done, and they don't want to steer away from that when it comes to cremation.
Poucher also elaborated on various ritual traditions of death, including tombs and open caskets.
They still build tombs and things like that.
Are those really costly?
Like a small house.
Huh. Would you say open caskets are still a popular choice?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You have more open caskets?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Why do you think people choose an open casket?
Number one, it's tradition, but number two, it's a way of, I'm sure you learn about the different stages of grieving, and one is denial. And so I think to see that person not sick, not in pain, to see that they actually did pass away, and to be able to, I think it's just important just for them to see them. I had a family the other day that wanted a closed casket, which it's rare that they do that, but I always say, I don't tell the family this, but I think that's just a bad idea to me. You're going to always wonder what they look like and things like that. And so when they came in, the casket was closed, and last minute they decided they wanted just to see her one more time. And so I even told them after, I said, I'm really glad that y'all did. They saw that she wasn't sick anymore. She looked beautiful. I think it's just important.
She says the best way to get through her job is by having a sense of humor, but sometimes the reality can sink in.
I mean, it does. I mean, for a personal standpoint, it sticks with me sometimes. Certain cases, certain families, things stand out and I'll think about it. But, to me as a person, I just know this is part of life. My brother passed away about 4 years ago, and I actually took care of him. And my friends were like, how can you do that? How could you have embalmed and done all that and for your brother? You weren't upset. And I was like, yeah, I cried the whole time I was with him. But I also felt like I wouldn't want anybody else to do it. And that was my last gift to him, was to take care of him. So that's just me personally, how I can deal with it. It's not like something that's heavy on my shoulders all the time now.
Poucher says one of the most rewarding feelings as a funeral director, besides helping the grieving families, is witnessing the honor of military funerals.
I think my favorite and is when we have military funerals, when they do the military honors at the cemetery. And just to see, especially if they're older and their friends are still alive, to see them all just, you know, how emotional and grateful they are this person served, you know, and for our country. And just the presentation the military does is always just uplifting and nice to see that they, you know, they come up there and do that for someone who served. So.
We wanted to find out how death has impacted our own Loyola community. Joe Hyde is a student veteran who served in the Navy and spent 6 months in Afghanistan.
We received information from a different agency that was reported out to the military that there was a radiation leak at the reactor site in Fukushima. And they mustered us all in the hangar bay, 800 guys, and they gave us iodine. And then they were like, all right, we're out of here, you know, and then we sailed south away from where we were. We were about 50 miles away, I think, at the time when we learned what was going on. But that was probably the most stressful 3 days on the ship, was those initial 3 after March 11th.
His military experience gave us a compelling perspective on living with death so close.
Sort of indifference to things that people take very seriously here. And I think it's because we're not really exposed to discomfort. Philosophy on death changes significantly when you sort of accept it as an immediate possibility. You know, like during that nuke thing in Japan, 800 guys in a hangar bay being fed iodine pills, you think you're gonna die, right? You think, oh, we've been exposed to something. And nobody really, you know, we don't have any nukes on board, the kind of ship I was on. So nobody knew the nature of radiation or radiation leak or the specific technical layout of the facility and what it meant for us. So of course we all thought the worst.
Hyde discusses how war changed him, yet he luckily found people to make integrating back into our society easier.
When you leave, you come back and you sort of assimilate back in. Some guys have trouble with that, but I never found it hard. I wanted to assimilate back in. I was done.
Houston Smith, another student, spoke to the personal challenges of death in his own life. Smith also acknowledged the recent spike in drug-related deaths.
So I lost my friend to the same demons Julian lost himself to. So personally, this sort of thing, part of me has become very numb to the sensation of understanding other people are dying around me, and then part of me still resonates with people that are just starting to experience this sort of relationship with death, how close they are to death. So a part of me has learned to tone it out or drown it out, and another part is open to hearing or even just understanding where other people would come from.
Having already taken this course, we asked Smith if he felt prepared for the tragedy he went through.
I still felt like I had lost something. So as much as I'd like to say that the class had mentally prepared me for something, it still didn't prepare me for, you know, the wall that had been broken down. But I'll say that rationalizing death and the aftermath, the coping of death is definitely was easier for me after having taken the class, for sure, because it's just something you should talk about.
These perspectives have only strengthened the importance of discussing the inevitable. This course has taught us a lot about the process of death and almost every aspect of it. It has opened our eyes to the reality that death is a natural part of life and has allowed us to become more open about the taboo subject with our friends and family. Talking about living with death and dying has been beneficial, but like Smith said, will anything ever really prepare us for the loss of someone close to us?